This is Living the RV Dream, episode 159 for Friday, September 4th, 2020.
I'm riding in my RV, wherever I want to be, 'cause I'm free in my RV, yeah.
Hello, happy campers. Hello, happy travelers around the world. All right, everybody. Our guest today is Nathan Pettyjohn, and he's an author, talent manager, and entrepreneur. And he just recently wrote a book called Travels with Hafa. And I would like to welcome him to the podcast today. And hey, Nathan, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm in Los Angeles in Hermosa Beach.
Hermosa Beach, yeah, I've actually been there. I was there once some years back. We were staying near LAX, and we said, let's just take this Sepulveda Boulevard South, see where it leads, and we ended up in Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach as well. It's a nice area.
Yeah, it's beautiful down here.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to write this book.
Yeah, so, I grew up in Oklahoma, and I moved to Los Angeles when I was 19, and I studied film. I worked for a producer for a little while as an assistant, and then I started a digital marketing company called Corduroy in 2011, and so I'm still running that. And it's been sort of a lifestyle business. Like, I don't have tons of clients, but, it's done fine and been able to enable me to travel. And the last few years, I've started traveling a lot more. My last book I wrote was called Zen and the Art of Admin Tasks. And it was like a real short tactical guide about how I outsource my emails and have an admin handle a lot of, day-to-day kind of things. And because of that book, I was able to go to like Cuba and Colombia and Brazil and a bunch of different trips. And I would go for 4 or 5 weeks at a time. And then I got this dog, and I went through a breakup last year and decided to rent an RV for the month of October for about like 3.5 weeks. And I went on that trip, kind of inspired by John Steinbeck's book, Travels with Charlie. And maybe midway through the trip, I started thinking like maybe I should, write my own notes. And so I started writing things down, and, it wasn't really the goal to write a book, but I had all those notes done. And then this year during March, April, when quarantine really hit, especially here in LA, just packed with people, but you can't even go to the beach, or you couldn't, go to restaurants or anything. I started really writing it then. And so the month of April of this year, I wrote this book during quarantine, and it was kind of a way for me to just relive the trip and imagine being back out on the road.
Yeah, that's definitely a good time to spend writing a book. Or a lot of people have been doing projects that they have been putting off for years, because really for a couple of months there was nothing we could do. And tell us a little bit about the name of your dog, Hafa. How did that came about?
Well, I was in Brazil when I decided to get him, so I named him Raphael, and they pronounce their R's with like an H, so it'd be Rafael. Yeah. And shortened, it's just Hafa. But they would spell it R-A-F-A. So I did my book H-A-F-A just to make it a little easier for the English audience to pronounce it.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I'm familiar. The R is kind of in between, like the French R. It's a fascinating language, Portuguese. I speak Spanish. That was my first language. And Portuguese is very similar, but it has this beautiful accent, actually.
I teach my dog a lot of Portuguese commands.
Oh, you do?
So I'll tell him, senta for sit, or vem aqui for come here. I'll say those kinds of things to him, kind of just so he'll only listen to me when we're in the United States.
Yeah, that's a cool. Like, what kind of dog is it?
He's a German Shepherd.
German Shepherd. Oh, those are smart.
He was a puppy. Yeah, he was a puppy when we took the trip. He was about 8-9 months old. So it was cool that he was going through his early years and able to go on a trip like this and see the real world and not be stuck in a city just with fences and leashes and rules and stuff. And I'm really glad that he was able to start his life like that.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, I think RVing is the best way to travel with a pet, because you can have them with you all the time. You know, you don't have to put them in a cage, you put them in the plane, especially a large dog like that. You know, it will be a challenge to travel internationally.
Yeah, he loved it. It was a lot of fun.
So, what kind of RV did you end up getting? Did you buy one, or did you just rent for a few weeks? What did you do?
I would like to buy one, but for this trip, I was a little inexperienced. I was kind of a newbie to all this. My dad had an RV when I was growing up in Oklahoma, and we'd go to some places, but I had never driven anything like that. So I went to one of those rental websites, and I rented one from somebody that owned theirs. Mine was a 2004 Fleetwood Southwind, so 36 foot, pretty good size.
Yeah, no, yeah. You didn't play around. You got like something relatively big for a newbie. I mean, that's a gas engine class. Did you find it any type of trouble, like parking at places, especially traveling just with the RV? Right, you weren't towing a car or anything like that.
Yeah, it was just the RV. Parking was a little tricky some places, especially at night, or I did a lot of boondocking. That was my favorite thing. But I guess most of the difficulties I had were probably with like weather, driving through snow and ice and wind, and just learning how to navigate.
What time of the year did you do this?
October.
October. So yeah, you're getting there to the beginning of the cold season. Well, if in LA, not really, but once you once you get to higher elevation and further north. And as I read in the book, you stuck mostly to the western United States. So I imagine parking wasn't as much of an issue as it would be like in the Northeast or like in LA, for example. I'm sure you probably had trouble parking in Hermosa Beach where you live.
Yeah, when I loaded it up, I've got like metered parking in front of my house, so I had to have two of my friends park their cars in front of my home and then move them as I pulled up so I could load and unload. But yeah, I just went through 11 states, did like a big loop. So I went through, like Utah, Wyoming, Montana, and then back west through the top section of Idaho, then did a little bit of Washington, and then through Oregon, and then back down to California.
Yeah, that's a great part of the country to RV. I mean, you went through some pretty steep mountains up there in Montana and Idaho, I imagine. And any did you meet any memorable people? I mean, you traveled with the dog, and you also went with your brother, I think, right?
My brother came for the first 5. My brother came for the first 5 days of the trip, but then he had to fly home from Salt Lake City to go back to. He lives in San Diego, so he had to go back to work. But his birthday overlapped with those first days, so I got to spend the first few days with him. Got used to the RV a little bit. I saw my nephew in Utah. I saw a good friend of mine that lives in Bozeman, Montana, and spent a few days there. So other people did kind of come in and out. In the book, I talk about like going out to different bars and stuff and meeting locals, and there is certainly a lot of interesting people that I met.
Yeah.
But my favorite parts, like I stayed at national parks and RV parks and KOA and parking lots, but my favorite thing was always the boondocking of just kind of being out on my own with just me and the dog. There's a few spots where we stayed at like a ranch in Billings, Montana with 17,000 acres, and it was just us.
Yes.
And things like that were just so amazing.
Yeah, I know. I love doing that too, and the idea of being self-contained, and you have your own water, your own power, your own. You are out there, and did you have a solar panels on the RV for power, or was it pretty much like just your batteries and generator and stuff?
It's just the batteries and generator. It took me a couple days to figure all the simple things out, like just using the propane heater and stuff. Like I had plugged in the little portable heaters, and then I blew a fuse. So then my power inverter stopped working. And then for a couple days going up in elevation and getting colder, the generator was finicky. So there were a couple times where it was just like, no internet,
any specific like funny, newbie mistakes that you made that you want to share with us?
A bunch of them. I mean, I was nervous about the tire like one of the tires, someone told me I should replace it at like some gas stop. So I was kind of fear mongered into buying a new tire, which was kind of expensive.
Yeah.
Propane was probably the biggest one because I woke up at the East Canyon State Park, which is about 40 miles east of where you are right now by Salt Lake City. It was real cold, and I hadn't turned on the propane, and my dog was like on top of me shivering because it was so cold. So it took me a few days to really figure out just even a lot of the basic stuff.
Yeah. And you just jumped into the deep end, right? You didn't like take any classes before or anything like that. You used that.
Yeah, and I didn't plan out like where to stay each night. I just kind of started driving, and then I would use different apps to find out where some BLM land was or where I could park. But yeah, I didn't plan out very much at all.
Any apps specifically that you found particularly helpful? I know I use a bunch of them too, so I wanted to know which ones you used.
Yeah, I mean, I booked the RV on Outdoorsy. I made the original itinerary on Road Trippers, which was a really helpful app.
Yeah,
because it'll also tell you like kind of gas mileage and different attractions to see. The Free Roam app has a lot of good info on BLM land, so I liked that app a lot. Trying to think of what else. I tried a lot of the other ones that tell you about campsites, but I didn't find them super useful. My friend in Montana had just launched an app called Land Trust, where people that own a lot of land can list it for people to rent to go hunting or something.
Okay.
So he had just signed up a new client with the 17,000 acres in Billings, and that's why we went to that ranch and we were able to camp out. Out there with 17,000 acres and the dog.
Yeah,
and that was really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. Any people you met on the road that stand out as interesting characters? Who would be like the most interesting character you met, and where?
Well, I met a lot of interesting guys at bars and had conversations, and I talk in the book about just all my thoughts, and we talk about dating apps and dog training and religion and different stuff. One that I thought was kind of memorable was in Billings, Montana, when we were going out to that ranch, because we had lunch beforehand in town, and the guy that was showing us the property was sitting with us at lunch, and I found out that like a year before he had an accident while he was out hunting on that property with his son. He was riding on a four-wheeler, sitting on a shotgun, and went over a cattle grate and was going maybe 15 miles an hour, and then just immediately when he went over the cattle grate went to 0 miles an hour, and the two back tires came up. The shotgun dislodged and fired from directly underneath him and shot his own balls off, and then the bullets went up into his abdomen. And I only found out about this, and then he had to send his 12-year-old son to go call for help. And while we were at lunch, this guy was sitting behind us and leaned over and was like, "Hey, I thought that was you. I was one of the paramedics that was the first to arrive, and we had given you a 2% chance of surviving." And they talked for a minute, but I wouldn't have even known that story if the paramedic hadn't been sitting behind us at lunch. So there's a lot of those kind of little things that you meet very interesting people that, there's stories that you had no idea even happened.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yes, sometimes you meet people from all over the country and the world. Actually, I've met, and their stories are amazing. And of course, you visited probably some of the most beautiful parts of the western part of the United States. Which, if there's one that you could, it's hard for me to answer this question too. Which, if there's one that would be your favorite, what would that be?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, we did stay at Yellowstone, Yosemite, Zion.
Those are the classic national parks. Top. You're at the top 5 right there. Yeah, absolutely.
Mount Rainier and Crater Lake. I didn't really like like I stayed within the park at most of those, and it was kind of crowded and kind of, a lot of rules and, dog has to be on a leash and all those kinds of things. So it wasn't as fun for me as boondocking was. I stayed at a spot near Mount Rainier that was really nice and relaxing, and it was raining, and I really liked the atmosphere there. I think maybe Crater Lake was possibly my favorite too, because the dog was just having the best day of his life, running around in circles, and it was beautiful there. And it was kind of late in the season, like late October, where they were closing those parks. I think it was like the last 2 days that you could even park there. So it wasn't very busy. It snowed, but it was just like a really memorable day, and it was just me and the dog on like a Friday. But it wasn't like being in LA on a Friday and wishing you were going out or seeing people on Instagram posting things. It was just like I was very fulfilled just being out there with the dog.
Yeah, no cell phone signal. I'm sure it was just you and nature and the dog. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Crater Lake is still on my bucket list. I haven't quite made it there yet, but it's on the short list now for sure. And is there any place that didn't live up to the hype that everybody tells you? Because I have a few of those myself. A place like you must go. This is like the epitome of the beauty or what have you. And you were like, not really.
The thing that struck me was, at all of those parks, like Zion was the first one I went to, but from then on, every time I was at a national park, I mean, it's gorgeous, and the people that work there, the park employees, are all really nice, wonderful people, and it's hard to complain. But I hated just being out there with so many people. Like it was like you're all in a row, like you're at Disneyland, going up to the same hike to take a picture from the same exact vista as everyone else. And in my opinion, there's thousands of beautiful places in this country that you can go take a picture, be at by yourself, that you don't really need to just stand in line and take the same picture as everyone else. So I think that was, one of my takeaways from the hype, that people are, you must go to Zion or Yellowstone or something. Yeah. Like it's gorgeous there, but there's other beautiful places that you're not basically in a Disney line of people.
Yeah. Especially Yosemite. I don't know if did you go to Yosemite or not?
Yeah.
You went to Yosemite. It's one of those places that is like Disney. I don't know. This year is going to be different. I mean, everything is different this year. But when I was in Yosemite last year, that's one of the things. Like, it's that traffic jam. The whole park is the whole valley is a traffic jam, and I think it's those places may perhaps slightly off season. Like I did Zion in the dead of winter, and there was no one there. It was awfully cold, but there was no one there, and that was a good experience.
I talk about Yosemite in the book about that exactly. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see a cheesecake factory up there soon. It's like you can go up there in a BMW and stay at a nice resort kind of place and ride a horse, up to the trail or whatever, and there's a golf course, and I don't know, there's a lot of it that, in my view, I was kind of seeing it from the perspective of 60 years later after John Steinbeck's novel of his road trip, and how much different Yosemite and the Redwoods and that experience would have been 60 years ago versus, this kind of resort-like, version of it.
It's like now everybody discovered it, and I think we need to discover new places. I'm sure there's some places out there that, although let me tell you, Yosemite, those waterfalls, that's like it looks like the movie Avatar to me. It's like something out of this world, but that's
Yosemite is incredibly gorgeous. Yeah, you feel majesty when you're there for sure. I don't want to say bad things about Yosemite, but that was kind of the takeaway.
Yeah. If you take the crowds out, it's one of the most marvelous places on earth, I think. And all right, any final lessons learned from this trip? Did you? I'm trying to think like. Perhaps any stereotypes that you had that got debunked, or reaffirmed for that matter, or any final takeaways?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think just saying yes and going out and doing it was the best decision I could have made. I didn't want to return the RV, and I wanted to go again as soon as I got back. I think that, and it reaffirmed what I already really believed in. But I talk a little bit in the book about the idea of bucket lists and how, you usually think of it as like a end of your life kind of thing. Like, I'll put this off until I'm retired, or I'll put off seeing this until it's easier and I have more money saved up or something. It's like, no, actually, quarantine and COVID is a great example of, you never know when you're going to have another chance to get out of your house and go on the road and have these experiences. So you might as well do them today, right now. And I think, I talk about it a lot more in the book. That's kind of the short version of it. But I think that this mindset of bucket lists and, pushing things off until later in life is the biggest takeaway for me, or for what I would hope readers would get out of this, is saying, yeah, I should go on a trip myself, even if it's, not 3 weeks or something, even if it's just 1 week, getting out in nature and exploring and taking an RV somewhere it was such a life-changing experience. I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. Any plans to do it again in the future? I mean, right now it's super popular because nobody wants to fly, nobody wants to go, nobody can travel internationally. So a lot of people are RVing. Let me tell you.
I would love to. I want to buy an RV now. I mean, this last trip definitely convinced me that it's the way to go. I loved it. But nothing's planned yet. I don't have any big trips planned for the moment.
All right. Well, Nathan, I want to thank you for being on the podcast, and your book, Travels with Hafa. It's available on paperback and on Kindle as well, I believe, right?
Yes, on Amazon.
On Amazon. I'm going to put a link in the show notes. And man, I'll see you on the road. Hopefully we'll meet in person at some point in our travels back and forth.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me.